Our own daughter locked us in the basement to take over the house. But my wife whispered, "Shoo. I have a secret. My name is George Turner, and I'm 65 years old. For the past 43 years, I built a successful construction company from the ground with my bare hands, working 16-hour days, missing birthdays and school plays, all so my family would never want for anything. I thought I was building a legacy. I never imagined I was building my own prison." It was a cold Tuesday morning in October when everything fell apart. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn golden outside our Victorian home in Portland, Oregon, the same house I'd bought with my first big construction contract back in 1985. Sarah, our only daughter, had been acting strange for weeks. She'd been coming by more often with her husband Marcus, asking detailed questions about the business, about our finances, about our will. "Dad, you're getting older," she'd say with that concerned tone that never quite reached her eyes. "Mom's been forgetting things. Maybe it's time to think about letting us help more." My wife Helen, bless her heart, had been experiencing some mild forgetfulness lately. Nothing serious, just the normal signs of aging that come to us all. But Sarah and Marcus acted like she had full-blown dementia. They'd exchange these meaningful looks whenever Helen couldn't remember where she put her reading glasses or forgot a neighbor's name. That Tuesday morning, I was in my home office reviewing blueprints for a new commercial project when I heard shouting from the living room. Helen's voice was raised, something that rarely happened in our household. "I don't care what you think is best for us," Helen was saying. "This is our home." I rushed to the living room to find Sarah standing with her arms crossed, her face red with anger. Marcus was behind her, his tall frame looming over my petite wife like a storm cloud. He was always an intimidating man, 6'3" with broad shoulders and a perpetual scowl that made me wonder what my daughter saw in him. "What's going on here?" I demanded. Sarah spun around to face me, and for a moment, I saw something in her expression that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't the face of my little girl who used to climb on my lap and ask me to read her bedtime stories. This was the face of a stranger. "Dad, we've been patient long enough," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "Mom clearly can't take care of herself anymore, and you're too stubborn to see it. We're moving in to take care of things properly." "Moving in?" I laughed, thinking this had to be some kind of misunderstanding. "Honey, we don't need taking care of. Your mother is fine, and I'm still running a successful business." That's when Marcus stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "Actually, George, about that business." He showed me the screen, and my blood ran cold. It was a legal document, transfer papers for Turner Construction. My signature was at the bottom, but I had no memory of signing anything. "How did you?" I started, but Sarah cut me off. "Power of attorney, Dad. Mom signed it last week during one of her confused episodes. She doesn't even remember doing it." I looked at Helen, who was standing there with tears in her eyes, shaking her head. "I never signed anything," she whispered. "George, I swear I never signed anything." But there it was, her signature, looking authentic enough to fool anyone who didn't know the truth. They had forged it. My own daughter and her husband had forged my wife's signature to steal everything we'd worked for. "You can't be serious," I said, my hands beginning to shake with rage. "Sarah, I'm your father. How could you do this to us?" "Because someone has to think practically," she snapped. "You two are living in denial. Mom's condition is only going to get worse, and you're both too old to handle a business and this big house. We're doing what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone, or best for you?" Helen asked quietly, and I could hear decades of disappointment in her voice. Marcus pulled out another set of papers. "We've also arranged for you both to move into Sunset Manor. It's a nice assisted living facility across town. They have activities, medical staff on site, people your own age to socialize with." "Sunset Manor?" I felt the walls closing in around me. I'd driven past that place. It was basically a warehouse for old people waiting to die. "We're not going anywhere. This is our home." "Not anymore," Sarah said, and there was no emotion in her voice whatsoever. The house is being transferred to us as well. It's for your own good, Dad. You'll understand eventually. That's when I lost it. 43 years of providing for this family, of sacrificing everything so Sarah could have dance lessons and private school and a college education, and this was how she repaid us? Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now, both of you. Sarah and Marcus exchanged another one of their looks, and I saw Marcus nod slightly. Before I knew what was happening, Marcus had grabbed my arms from behind, his construction worker strength easily overpowering my aging body. I'm sorry, George, but we can't let you hurt yourselves anymore, he said as he wrestled me toward the basement door. What are you doing? Helen screamed, rushing toward us. Sarah caught her by the shoulders. It's just temporary, Mom, Sarah said with fake sweetness. Just until the papers are finalized and we can get you both settled somewhere safe. They forced us down the wooden stairs into our basement, despite our protests and Helen's tears. The basement was cold and damp, filled with old furniture and boxes of Christmas decorations. We'd always meant to finish it properly, but other priorities always came first. Please, Helen begged as Sarah closed the basement door. Please don't do this to us. We heard the sound of a heavy piece of furniture being dragged across the floor above us, blocking the door. Then Sarah's voice came through the floorboards. We'll bring you meals and check on you regularly. Try to understand, we're doing this because we love you. The sound of their footsteps disappeared, and suddenly the house was quiet except for the humming of the old furnace and Helen's quiet sobs. I held my wife in my arms as she cried, feeling more helpless than I'd ever felt in my entire life. How had it come to this? Where had we gone wrong with Sarah? We'd given her everything, loved her unconditionally, supported her through college and her wedding and the early years of her marriage when Marcus couldn't find steady work. George, Helen whispered after several minutes of silence, they don't know. Don't know what, sweetheart? She pulled away from me, wiping her tears, and there was something different in her expression. A strength I hadn't seen in months. They don't know what's behind that wall, she said, pointing to the far corner of the basement where an old bookshelf stood against the concrete blocks. I looked at the wall, confused. What do you mean? Helen moved toward the bookshelf with purpose, her hands running along the rough concrete blocks behind it. Help me move this, she said. Together, we slid the heavy wooden bookshelf aside, revealing the bare wall behind it. Helen's fingers found a particular block, and to my amazement, it moved. She worked it loose and set it aside, revealing a dark space behind the wall. Helen, what is this? I asked, completely bewildered. She reached into the dark space and pulled out a small metal box, the kind people use for important documents. Her hands were trembling as she opened it, revealing a thick stack of papers and what looked like photographs. I've been keeping this secret for 39 years, George, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never told you because I was ashamed, because I thought it would hurt you too much. But now I think it's time you knew the truth about our daughter. My heart was pounding as she handed me the first photograph. It was old, slightly faded, but clear enough to make out the faces. It showed a young woman who looked exactly like Sarah, standing next to a man I'd never seen before. They were holding a baby. Helen, who is this? I asked, though somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew the answer was going to change everything. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. That's Sarah's real mother, George. Our Sarah, she's not our biological daughter. Before I continue with this story that's been eating at my soul, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening to this from right now? Are you at home, maybe doing chores or lying in bed? Are you driving somewhere, trying to pass the time? I hope you'll take a moment to hit that like button if this story is resonating with you, and if you want to hear more true stories like this one, please subscribe to the channel. It means more than you know to an old man trying to make sense of his life. Now, back to that basement, and the photograph that was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. I stared at the photo, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. The young woman in the picture could have been Sarah's twin, but the clothes, the hairstyle, the faded quality of the photograph all screamed 1980s. The baby in her arms was unmistakably Sarah, those same bright blue eyes, that same stubborn set to her chin even as an infant. "Helen," I said slowly, "what are you telling me?" My wife sat down heavily on an old trunk, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. Her name was Jessica Martinez, she began, her voice hollow. She was 19 years old, George. Just a kid herself, working 2 jobs to support her baby after the father ran off. The basement felt like it was closing in around us. 40 years of marriage, and my wife had kept this secret from me all this time. How did we end up with Sarah? Helen reached into the metal box and pulled out a stack of legal documents, yellowed with age. Jessica was my cousin Maria's daughter. You remember Maria, don't you? She moved to California when we were first married. I nodded, barely remembering the quiet woman who had visited us once or twice in the early years of our marriage. Jessica got sick, Helen continued. Really sick. Leukemia. She knew she was dying, and she was terrified about what would happen to her baby. She called Maria, begging for help, and Maria called me. The pieces were starting to come together, but I still couldn't believe what I was hearing. So we adopted Sarah? Not exactly. Helen's voice cracked. Jessica died before we could arrange a proper adoption. She was so young, George, and so scared. In her final days, she made Maria promise that her baby would go to a good family. Maria brought Sarah to us when she was just 8 months old. I looked at the photograph again, studying the young woman's face. She had Sarah's eyes, but there was a sadness in them that our Sarah had never possessed, at least not until recently. But the birth certificate, the hospital records. I started. Maria had connections, Helen said quietly. People who could make things look official. It was different back then, George. Less paperwork, fewer questions asked. We registered Sarah as our biological daughter, and that's what she's believed her entire life. The weight of this revelation was crushing. Not only had Helen kept this massive secret from me for 4 decades, but Sarah had no idea she was adopted. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell her? Helen stood up and walked to the small basement window, looking out at the feet of people passing by on the sidewalk above. At first, I planned to tell you. But you were so happy when I brought her home, so proud to be a father. You'd been wanting children for so long, and the doctor said I couldn't. She trailed off, and I remembered those painful years when we tried unsuccessfully to start a family. And then months turned into years, she continued, and Sarah grew up calling us Mama and Daddy, and it felt real. She was ours in every way that mattered. I convinced myself that the truth would only hurt everyone. I felt a mixture of anger and understanding washing over me. On one hand, Helen had lied to me about something fundamental to our family. On the other hand, I couldn't deny that Sarah had been the light of our lives, the daughter we'd always dreamed of having. There's more, Helen said, reaching back into the box. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. Jessica left something for Sarah. A letter, and some other things. She made Maria promise that if anything ever happened to her, these would be given to Sarah when she turned 21. Sarah's 37 now, I pointed out. I know. Helen's voice was barely audible. I kept them. I told myself I was protecting her, but really, I was protecting myself. I was afraid that if she knew the truth, she'd leave us. She'd want to find Jessica's family, her real family. I took the envelope from Helen's trembling hands. It was sealed, but I could feel the weight of its contents. Somewhere in this envelope was a letter from a dying 19-year-old girl to the daughter she'd never get to know. Helen, what else is in here? I asked, gesturing to the metal box. She pulled out more documents, hospital records, a death certificate for Jessica Martinez, and several more photographs. One showed Jessica with an older woman who must have been Maria. Another showed Jessica pregnant, standing in front of what looked like a small apartment building. I kept everything, Helen said. I told myself it was in case Sarah ever needed medical information about her birth family, but really, I think I kept it all because I felt guilty. Jessica trusted us with her most precious thing, and we erased her existence. Just then, we heard something that made our blood run cold. Voices upstairs, but not just Sarah and Marcus. There were other people in our house, strangers walking around, talking about our belongings like we were already dead. The master bedroom has great natural light, a woman's voice was saying. And the hardwood floors are in excellent condition. Is this a fucking real estate showing? I whispered to Helen, my rage building to a dangerous level. Helen grabbed my arm. George, there's something else. Something I haven't told you about Jessica's death. What do you mean? She pulled out another document from the box, this one more recent. It was a copy of a newspaper article from the Sacramento Bee, dated just 6 months ago. The headline read, "Local woman seeks information about daughter given up in 1987. My heart stopped. Below the headline was a photo of Maria, now in her 70s but unmistakably the same woman from the old photographs. The article went on to describe how she was searching for her granddaughter, who had been placed with a family in Oregon after her daughter Jessica's death. Helen, I whispered, Maria's still alive? She is. And George, she's been looking for Sarah. That article? Sarah saw it. She contacted the newspaper, and they put her in touch with Maria. The voices upstairs were getting louder. I could hear Marcus explaining something about the house's history, about how it had been in the family for decades and was now available for immediate sale. When? I asked. When did Sarah find out? 3 months ago, Helen said, tears streaming down her face. Maria told her everything. About Jessica, about the unofficial adoption, about the letters and photos I was supposed to give her. 3 months. Sarah had known the truth about her parentage for 3 months, and she'd been planning this revenge ever since. But there was still something that didn't add up. Helen, if Maria's been looking for Sarah, if she wants a relationship with her, why is Sarah doing this to us? Why not just confront us about the lie? Helen's face crumpled. Because it's not just about the adoption, George. When Maria told Sarah about Jessica, she told her other things too. Things about why Jessica really needed to give up her baby. What things? Helen reached deeper into the box and pulled out a police report, also yellowed with age. Jessica didn't just get sick, George. Someone hurt her. Badly. And that someone was connected to us. I felt the room spin around me. What are you saying? The father of Sarah's baby, Jessica's boyfriend who abandoned her, his name was Michael Turner, George. He was your nephew. Your brother's son. The words hit me like a physical blow. Michael Turner, my brother Tom's boy, who had been wild and reckless and had caused our family nothing but trouble until he finally disappeared sometime in the late 80s. I remembered him vaguely, a young man with a nasty temper and a drinking problem who had drifted from job to job and gotten into more than his share of fights. Michael got Jessica pregnant and then beat her up when she told him, Helen continued. He put her in the hospital, George. That's how she got so sick, her immune system was compromised from the injuries, and that's when the leukemia took hold. I stared at the police report, seeing Michael's name listed as a suspect in assault charges that were apparently never filed. Jessica had been too scared to testify, too afraid he'd come back and hurt her worse. So when Sarah found out the truth, I said slowly, she didn't just learn that we'd lied about her adoption. She learned that her biological father was a member of our family, and that he had killed her birth mother as surely as if he'd put a gun to her head. Helen nodded miserably. And Maria told her one more thing, George. Something that I never knew until Sarah confronted me about it last week. What? Michael Turner isn't missing, George. He's not some long-lost family member who disappeared decades ago. Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. He's been living in Seattle under a different name this whole time. And Sarah found him. The knowledge that Sarah had found Michael Turner, my brother's son, her biological father, the man who had killed her birth mother through violence, sat in my stomach like a lead weight. I could hear the real estate agents upstairs talking about square footage and market value while my world crumbled around me in this damp basement. Helen, what exactly did Sarah tell you when she confronted you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My wife was clutching the police report with shaking hands. She came here last Thursday morning while you were at the job site downtown. She had this manila folder with her, filled with copies of everything Maria had kept. Photos, documents, even some letters that Jessica had written to her mother before she died. Helen paused, wiping tears from her eyes. She spread it all out on our kitchen table like evidence in a courtroom, George. She didn't yell or scream. She just looked at me with these cold eyes and said, "I know who I really am, and I know what you stole from me." The voices upstairs were moving toward the back of the house now, probably showing off Helen's garden through the kitchen window. Our garden, where Sarah had played as a little girl, where she'd helped Helen plant tomatoes every spring and pick strawberries every summer. What did you tell her? I asked. I tried to explain. I told her about Jessica being so young and scared, about how we tried for so long to have children, about how we loved her from the moment Maria brought her to us. Helen's voice cracked. But she just stared at me, George. And then she asked the question I'd been dreading for 37 years. Which was? She asked if you knew. She asked if the man she'd called Daddy her entire life had been in on the lie from the beginning. I felt a chill run through me. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That you didn't know, that I'd kept it from you too because I was afraid of losing both of you. Helen looked at me with desperate eyes. I thought that would help, George. I thought if she knew you weren't part of the deception, she wouldn't be so angry with you. But I could see from Helen's expression that it hadn't worked out that way. What did she say? She said that made it worse. She said that meant I'd stolen her identity not just from her, but from you too. That I'd built our entire marriage on a foundation of lies. Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. And then she told me about Michael. The real estate agent's voice drifted down from directly above us. The basement has great potential for a man cave or home theater, she was saying. If only she knew there were two people trapped down here listening to her sell their life away. She'd found him 3 weeks ago, Helen continued. He's living in Seattle under the name Mike Thompson. He's married, George. Has 2 kids of his own, both in high school. He owns a small construction company, just like you. The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael Turner, who had beaten a 19-year-old girl so badly that she died from the complications, was living a normal family life just a few hours north of us. Meanwhile, the daughter he'd never known had grown up calling another man Dad. Did Sarah confront him? I asked, though I already suspected I knew the answer. Helen nodded. She drove up there on a Saturday. Waited outside his house until his wife and kids left for what looked like soccer practice. Then she knocked on his door. I tried to imagine that scene, Sarah standing on some stranger's doorstep in Seattle, about to tell him that she was the daughter he'd never known existed, the daughter whose mother he'd killed through his violence. How did he react? According to Sarah, he went white as a sheet. She said she didn't even have to tell him who she was. He took one look at her face and said, "Oh God, you're Jessica's kid, aren't you?" Helen pulled out another document from the box, a handwritten letter on notebook paper, the ink slightly smeared as if tears had fallen on it while it was being written. Sarah wrote this after she came back from Seattle, Helen said, handing me the letter. She left it on our kitchen table before she went home that day. I think she wanted me to give it to you. I unfolded the letter, recognizing Sarah's neat handwriting immediately. It was dated 2 weeks ago. Mom and Dad. I don't even know what to call you anymore. Are you my parents? My kidnappers? My guardians? I've been trying to figure that out since I learned the truth about who I really am. I met my biological father yesterday. The man who killed my real mother. Do you want to know what he told me? He said he'd wondered about me for 37 years. He said not a day went by that he didn't think about Jessica and what he'd done to her. He said he tried to find out what happened to me, but Maria's family had moved and changed their names after Jessica died. But here's the part that's going to hurt you the most, especially you, Mom. He said he'd gotten sober 15 years ago and had been trying to make amends for his past. He tried to track down Jessica's family to apologize and to offer support for her child, for me. He found Maria 2 years ago. 2 years, Mom. And when he contacted her, she told him that Jessica's daughter was living with a family in Oregon who had lied about adopting her legally. She told him the family had promised to tell the child the truth when she was old enough, but had never done it. Maria gave him our address, Mom. Michael Turner has known where I lived for 2 years. He's been writing letters to you and Dad, trying to arrange a meeting so he could apologize to me in person and offer to pay for therapy or education or whatever I might need. Did you get those letters, Mom? Did you and Dad decide I wasn't worth the truth even when my biological father was trying to make things right? I found them in Dad's office desk when I was looking for the insurance papers you asked me to find last month. 23 letters from a man named Mike Thompson in Seattle, all returned unopened. All marked, returned to sender, in Dad's handwriting. So you both knew. For 2 years, you both knew that my biological father was trying to contact me, trying to make amends for what he'd done to my birth mother, and you decided I was better off not knowing. That's when I realized this was never about protecting me. This was about protecting yourselves. Protecting your perfect little family secret. Protecting your right to play house with someone else's child. Well, the game is over now. I'm taking back what should have been mine from the beginning. The business that Dad built while lying to me about who I was. The house where I grew up not knowing my own identity. The trust fund that you set up in my name using money that was earned while I was living a lie. I don't want your money, but I want you to understand what it feels like to have your entire life taken away from you by people you trusted. Maybe when you're sitting in that nursing home, you'll have time to think about Jessica Martinez. About the 19-year-old girl whose child you stole. About the grandmother who spent 35 years wondering what happened to her granddaughter. About the father who's been trying to make amends for 15 years while you hid me from him. I hope it was worth it. Sarah. I finished reading the letter with tears streaming down my face. I looked up at Helen, who was watching me with an expression of complete devastation. George, she whispered, we got those letters. You did return them. I begged you to, remember? I told you they were probably scams, people trying to take advantage of us because the business was doing well. I remembered. Over the past 2 years, we'd received periodic letters from someone named Mike Thompson in Seattle. Helen had insisted they were suspicious, possibly someone trying to case our house or learn about our finances. I'd returned them all unopened, just as Sarah had said. If I had opened just one of them, if I had been curious enough to read what the man had to say, this whole nightmare might have been avoided. Sarah might have learned the truth in a controlled way, with support and love and the chance to process it gradually. Instead, she discovered it through a newspaper article, learned about her birth father's attempts to contact her through snooping in my desk, and realized that Helen and I had been actively preventing her from learning about her real identity even when the truth was trying to reach her. Helen, I said slowly, Sarah's not wrong. We weren't protecting her. We were protecting ourselves. The footsteps upstairs were heading toward the front door now. I could hear Marcus thanking the real estate agent for her time, assuring her that they'd be ready to list the house as soon as the current residents were relocated. There's something else, Helen said quietly. Something Sarah doesn't know, but I think she suspects. What now? I asked, feeling like I couldn't take any more revelations. Helen reached into the very bottom of the metal box and pulled out a small white envelope, sealed with wax. Jessica's letter to Sarah. The one she was supposed to get on her 21st birthday. I stared at the envelope, knowing that inside was a message from a dying 19-year-old girl to the daughter she'd never get to know. A message that Sarah should have received 16 years ago. Helen, please tell me you're not thinking of keeping this from her any longer. I'm not, Helen said, and I could hear the resolution in her voice. George, I think it's time we told Sarah everything. Not just about the adoption, but about the letters from Michael, about why we really kept the truth from her, about all of it. The sound of a car starting up in our driveway told us that Marcus and the real estate agent were leaving. Soon, Sarah would be back, probably with more legal documents and more plans for our future. Helen, what if she doesn't forgive us? What if knowing the whole truth just makes her angrier? My wife looked at me with more strength than I'd seen in her in months. Then at least she'll be angry about the truth instead of angry about the lies. That girl deserves to know who she really is, George. She deserves to read her mother's last words to her. And she deserves to decide for herself whether she wants a relationship with her biological father. I heard the front door open upstairs, followed by Sarah's voice calling out, "The showing went well. We should have multiple offers by next week." Helen stood up and walked toward the hiding place behind the bookshelf. "Help me get everything out, George. When Sarah comes down here, I'm going to give her what should have been hers 37 years ago. Are you sure about this?" Helen looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I should have done it decades ago. I stole that girl's identity, George. I stole her mother's last words to her. I stole her right to know her own story." She paused, listening to Sarah's footsteps moving around upstairs. "I can't give her back her childhood or her birth mother or the years she could have spent knowing her grandmother Maria. But I can give her the truth." As we began pulling everything out of the hiding place one last time, I realized that Helen was right. We'd been so focused on protecting our family, our happiness, our comfortable life, that we'd forgotten that Sarah was a real person with a real history that existed before us. We'd treated her like she was ours to keep instead of someone we'd been trusted to love and raise. And now it was time to face the consequences of that choice. The question was, when Sarah learned about Jessica's final letter, when she understood the full scope of what we'd kept from her, would there be any chance of forgiveness? Or would this be the final nail in the coffin of our family? The sound of Sarah's footsteps on the basement stairs felt different this time. Heavier. More deliberate. Helen and I had spread everything out on the old trunk, all the photographs, documents, police reports, and most importantly, Jessica's sealed letter to her daughter. "Mom? Dad?" Sarah called down as she descended. "I brought you some soup for dinner. I figured you might be getting." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw us sitting there surrounded by the contents of Helen's secret box. For a long moment, nobody moved. Sarah stood frozen on the bottom step, holding a thermos of soup, staring at the evidence of her real identity spread out like puzzle pieces. "Where did you get all of this?" she asked quietly, setting the thermos down on the small table. "I've had it for 37 years, Helen said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all day. "I should have given it to you long ago." Sarah walked slowly toward us, her eyes taking in each item. She picked up the photograph of Jessica holding her as a baby, studying her birth mother's young face with an intensity that broke my heart. "She looks like me," she said softly. "You look like her," I corrected. "You have her eyes, her stubborn chin. Even the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, that's Jessica." Sarah glanced at me, and for a moment, some of the coldness in her expression softened. "You really didn't know, did you, Dad? About the adoption?" "No," I said honestly. "Your mother kept that secret from all of us. From you, from me, from everyone. But you knew about the letters from Michael," she said, and the accusation in her voice cut deep. "You knew my biological father was trying to reach me, and you sent his letters back." I couldn't deny it. I did. "But Sarah, I didn't know who he was. Your mother told me they were suspicious, possibly scams. I was trying to protect our family." "Protect your family," Sarah corrected. "Not mine. My family was Jessica Martinez, who died when I was 8 months old. My family was Maria, who spent 35 years wondering what happened to her granddaughter. My family was Michael Turner, who's been trying to make amends for 15 years while you hid me from him." Helen reached for the sealed envelope containing Jessica's letter. "Sarah, there's something else. Something your birth mother left for you." Sarah's eyes widened as she saw the wax seal, still intact after all these years. "What is this?" "A letter," Helen said, her hands trembling as she held it out. "Jessica wrote it for you in her final days. She made Maria promise it would be given to you on your 21st birthday. I'm 37 years old, Sarah whispered, taking the envelope with reverent care. I know. I kept it because. Helen's voice broke. Because I was selfish. Because I was afraid that if you read her words, you'd love her more than you loved me. Because I was terrified you'd leave us to find your real family. Sarah stared at the envelope for a long time, turning it over in her hands. She wrote this when she was dying? She was very sick, Helen said. But according to Maria, she spent her last conscious hours writing to you. She wanted to make sure you knew how much she loved you, even though she couldn't stay to raise you herself. The basement was completely quiet except for the sound of our breathing. Above us, I could hear Marcus moving around, probably packing our belongings or making more arrangements for our relocation to Sunset Manor. I need to read this alone, Sarah said finally. Of course, I said. Take all the time you need. But Sarah shook her head. No, I need to read it without you two here. Can you? She gestured toward the stairs. Helen and I looked at each other. We were prisoners in our own basement, but our daughter needed privacy to connect with her birth mother for the first time in 37 years. Sarah, I said carefully, the door upstairs is blocked. Marcus locked us down here. For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah looked genuinely surprised. He what? He and you locked us in the basement this morning, Helen said. Remember? You said it was temporary, until the legal papers were finalized. Sarah's face went pale. I told him to make sure you couldn't interfere with the property transfer, but I didn't tell him to actually lock you up. She ran a hand through her hair, looking genuinely distressed. I thought he'd just. I don't know, stay here to supervise or something. Sarah, we haven't been able to leave this basement all day, I said. We're hungry, thirsty, and your mother needs her medication. I watched my daughter's face as she processed this information. Whatever anger and hurt she was carrying, she hadn't intended for us to be physically trapped and neglected. The woman who had brought us soup for dinner wasn't a monster, even if she was taking our house and business away from us. Marcus, she called up the stairs. Marcus, come down here. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor above us, and Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs. What's wrong? Did you lock them in here? Actually lock them in? Marcus shrugged. You said to make sure they couldn't cause problems. I moved the china cabinet in front of the door. They've been trapped down here all day. Sarah's voice was rising. They need bathroom breaks, medication, proper food. I figured you were handling all that, Marcus said defensively. You didn't give me specific instructions. I could see the conflict playing out on Sarah's face. She was angry with us, furious about the lies and the stolen identity and the returned letters. But she wasn't cruel. She hadn't meant for us to be treated like prisoners of war. Move the cabinet, she ordered. Let them come upstairs to use the bathroom and get some real food. Sarah, what about the papers? The lawyer said. Move the damn cabinet, Marcus. A few minutes later, we heard the heavy furniture being dragged across the floor. The basement door opened, and for the first time in nearly 12 hours, Helen and I climbed the stairs into our own kitchen. The house looked different somehow, even though nothing had really changed. There were legal documents spread across the dining room table, and several boxes stacked near the front door, but it was still the home we'd lived in for decades. You have 30 minutes, Sarah said, still holding Jessica's letter. Use the bathroom, get something to eat, take your medication. Then I want you back downstairs while I read this. Helen headed straight for the medicine cabinet, while I went to the refrigerator. It felt surreal, asking permission to eat food in my own kitchen, but I was too emotionally drained to fight about it. Sarah, I said as I made a sandwich, whatever that letter says, whatever your mother wrote to you, we want you to know that we loved you from the moment you came into our lives. That never changed, even after Helen told me the truth today. Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. That's what makes this so hard, Dad. I know you love me. I know Mom loves me. But you loved me as Sarah Turner, the daughter who didn't really exist. You never had the chance to love me as Jessica Martinez's daughter, as the girl whose mother died giving her the best life she could. You're both, Helen said, returning from the bathroom with her pill organizer. You're Sarah Turner, the little girl who helped me plant tomatoes and called George, Daddy, and graduated valedictorian from Lincoln High School. But you're also Jessica Martinez's daughter, the baby she loved so much that she spent her dying days writing you a letter. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I need to find out which one of those people I really am. We finished our brief reprieve and returned to the basement. Sarah settled into the old armchair in the corner, Jessica's letter in her hands. Helen and I sat on the trunk, giving her as much space as the small basement would allow. Do you want us to leave you completely alone? Helen asked. Sarah considered this. No. I think I want you to hear this too. You've kept her words from me for 16 years past when I was supposed to get them. I want you to hear what she wanted to tell me. She carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded several pages of notebook paper covered in shaky handwriting. The ink was faded but still legible. My beautiful baby girl, Sarah began reading aloud, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're old enough to understand why I had to make the hardest decision of my life. Sarah's voice was already thick with emotion, but she continued. I want you to know that giving you to Helen and George wasn't about not wanting you. It was about wanting you to have everything I couldn't give you. I'm 19 years old, and I'm dying, and the man who is your father, he hurt me so badly that my body can't recover. I saw Sarah's hands tighten on the letter as she read about her birth father's violence. I don't want you to grow up hating him, though. People make terrible mistakes when they're young and scared. I hope that someday he finds a way to make peace with what he did. I hope that someday you can forgive him, even if I can't. Helen was crying openly now, and I felt my own tears starting. I chose Helen and George because when I met them, I could see how much love they had to give. They've been trying to have a baby for so long, and they promise me they'll love you like you're their own. I believe them. I have to believe them, because it's the only way I can let go. Sarah paused, wiping her eyes before continuing. But I need you to know some things about me, about where you come from. I need you to know that I love to read, especially poetry. I need you to know that I was studying to be a teacher before I got sick. I need you to know that I dreamed of taking you to the library every week and reading to you before bed. She did love poetry, Helen said softly. Maria told me that. I should have encouraged that in you. Sarah looked up. You did, Mom. You took me to the library every week. You read to me before bed. She looked back at the letter. There's more. I'm scared that you'll grow up not knowing who you really are. I'm scared that you'll feel like something is missing, like there's a part of yourself you can't quite reach. If that happens, I want you to know that what's missing is me, but it's also the best parts of yourself. Sarah's voice broke completely, and she had to stop reading for a moment to compose herself. You have my stubborn streak and my love of learning. You have my grandmother's hands, she was a seamstress and could make beautiful things from nothing. You have my father's sense of justice, he was a police officer who believed in doing what was right even when it was hard. I realized that Sarah had never known anything about her extended family, about the generations of people whose genes and traits she carried. Most importantly, you have my heart. The capacity to love completely, even when it hurts. Even when love means letting go. Sarah looked up at us, tears streaming down her face. She knew. She knew exactly what would happen. She knew I'd feel like something was missing. Did you? Helen asked softly. Did you always feel like something was missing? Sarah nodded. Always. I used to have dreams about a woman with dark hair who sang to me in Spanish. I used to ask you if I was adopted because I looked so different from both of you. And you always said. She looked at Helen accusingly. I always said you were our miracle baby, Helen finished. I told you that you looked like my grandmother, who had died before you were born. More lies, Sarah said, but without the venom she'd had earlier. She returned to the letter. There's one more thing I need to tell you. In my jewelry box, there's a small silver locket that belonged to my mother. It has her picture in it. I want you to have it, so you'll know what your grandmother looked like. Maria promised she'll make sure you get it. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver locket. Maria gave this to me when I found her. She said she'd been keeping it safe for me for 37 years. She opened the locket to reveal a tiny photograph of a woman who looked like an older version of Jessica. My granddaughter's great-grandmother, a woman whose existence we'd never even acknowledged. I hope you'll forgive me for not being strong enough to stay and raise you, Sarah continued reading. I hope you'll forgive Helen and George if they make mistakes trying to love you the way I would have. Most of all, I hope you'll know that every day you live, every smile, every tear, every triumph and every heartbreak, it's all a gift from me to you. The basement was completely silent except for the sound of our crying. I love you more than my own life, more than my own breath. Be happy, my beautiful girl. Be kind. Be strong. Be everything I dreamed you could be. Sarah folded the letter carefully, holding it against her chest. Forever your mama, Jessica Martinez. We sat in silence for several long minutes. Sarah clutching her birth mother's final words, Helen and I grappling with the magnitude of what we'd kept from her. Finally, Sarah looked up at us. She forgave you in advance, she said quietly. She knew you'd make mistakes, and she forgave you for them before you even made them. Sarah, Helen whispered, can you? Can you forgive us? My daughter, both daughters, Jessica's and ours, looked at us with red-rimmed eyes full of pain and love and confusion. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I want to try. The next 3 hours changed everything. Sarah called Marcus upstairs and told him to go home. Not back to their house, home to his mother's place in Salem, where he'd been staying since their separation 6 months ago. Yes, they'd been separated. Another truth that was finally coming to light. The marriage has been falling apart since I started learning about my real identity, Sarah explained as we sat around our kitchen table for the first time in months like a real family. Marcus kept pushing me to go after your money and property, saying you owed me compensation for the lies. But that was never what this was about for me. She looked tired, emotionally drained from crying over her birth mother's letter. But there was also something lighter about her, as if a burden she'd been carrying for decades had finally been lifted. What was it about then? Helen asked quietly. I needed to know if you could love the real me, Sarah said. Jessica Martinez's daughter. The girl whose mother died because a Turner man hurt her. The girl who comes from a line of seamstresses and police officers and teachers, not just construction workers and homemakers. I felt something break open in my chest. Sarah, honey, we never knew there was a difference. To us, you were always just, you. Our daughter. The girl who made us a family. But that's just it, Dad. You loved an incomplete version of me. You loved the parts of me that fit into your idea of who I should be, but you never had the chance to love the parts that came from Jessica's family. Helen reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. Tell us about those parts. Help us know the real you. Sarah smiled through her tears. I've always felt connected to social justice causes, even when you thought I was going through phases. That comes from my grandfather, Jessica's father. He was a police officer who lost his job because he refused to cover up corruption in his department. I remembered Sarah's college years, when she participated in protests and volunteer work that Helen and I had gently discouraged, thinking she should focus on her studies instead. I've always wanted to teach, she continued. Not just as a career, but as a calling. That comes from Jessica. And the way I've always felt most peaceful when I'm sewing or doing crafts with my hands, that's from Jessica's mother, my great-grandmother. You made those beautiful quilts, Helen said wonderingly. You always said you didn't know where that skill came from. Now I do. And the way I've always felt like I needed to defend people who couldn't defend themselves, the way I've always been drawn to stories about immigrants and families separated by circumstances. Sarah paused. That all makes sense now too. We talked until nearly midnight. Sarah told us about her meeting with Maria, about the drive to Seattle to confront Michael Turner, about the pain of discovering that we'd been actively preventing her from learning her truth even when that truth was trying to reach her. "What's he like?" I asked, surprising myself. "Michael?" Sarah considered this carefully. "Broken. Ashamed. He spent 15 years in therapy and AA, trying to understand why he hurt Jessica. He has a daughter who's 17 now. She looks like me. His wife knows everything about his past, and she's been supportive of his efforts to make amends." "Does he want a relationship with you?" Helen asked. "He wants to try. He says he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but he wants to earn the right to know the daughter he never got to raise. He's also—" Sarah hesitated. "He's been saving money for 37 years. In an account with my name on it. Money for college, for a wedding, for whatever I might have needed if he'd been able to be my father." I felt tears in my eyes again. The nephew I barely remembered, the young man who had caused so much pain, had spent decades trying to make amends for his sins. "Are you going to see him again?" I asked. "I think so. But not as his daughter. As Jessica's daughter, who happens to share his DNA. If that makes sense." It did make sense. Sarah was claiming her identity on her own terms, choosing which relationships to pursue and which legacy to carry forward. "What about us?" Helen asked, her voice small and scared. "Is there room in your life for the parents who lied to you?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I've been angry with you for 3 months," she finally said. "Planning this whole scheme, taking over the business and the house, arranging for you to be sent away. I thought it would make me feel better, getting revenge for all the lies." "Did it?" I asked. "No. It just made me feel empty. Because the truth is, you did love me. Even if it was incomplete, even if it was based on a lie, the love was real. And Jessica? Jessica told me to forgive you for your mistakes before you even made them." Helen was crying again. "We made so many mistakes, Sarah. So many." "Yes, you did. You stole my identity. You kept me from my birth family. You actively prevented me from learning the truth even when the truth was trying to reach me." Sarah's voice was firm but not unkind. "But you also loved me, protected me, gave me opportunities one might not have had otherwise. You raised me to be strong and independent and capable of standing up for myself, even when that meant standing up to you." I realized that Sarah was right. In our imperfect, misguided way, we had raised her to be exactly the kind of person who would eventually demand the truth and fight for her right to know her own story. "So what happens now?" I asked. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed us a series of text messages. "I've been in contact with the lawyer all evening. I'm reversing the property transfers. The house stays yours, the business stays yours. I never wanted your money anyway." "Then what did you want?" Helen asked. "I wanted you to stop lying to me. I wanted you to choose the truth over your own comfort. I wanted to know that you loved me enough to risk losing me by being honest." Sarah smiled sadly. "It took me threatening to take everything away from you, but you finally did it. You gave me Jessica's letter. You told me about Michael's attempts to contact me. You stopped protecting yourselves and started protecting my right to know who I am. We spent the rest of the night talking about everything." Sarah showed us more photos that Maria had given her, told us stories about Jessica's short life, shared her plans to visit her grandmother and learn more about her Mexican heritage. "I want to go back to school," she said. "I want to become a teacher, like Jessica planned to be. I want to work with immigrant children who might be separated from their families." "We'll support you," I said. "Whatever you need. I know you will. But I need to do this as myself. As Jessica's daughter who was raised by the Turners. As someone who belongs to both families but is owned by neither." As the sun began to rise over Portland, Sarah prepared to leave. She hugged Helen tightly, then turned to me. "Dad," she said, and my heart nearly broke with relief that she was still calling me that. I need some time to process all of this. To figure out how to integrate Jessica's story with the life you and Mom gave me. Can you give me that time? Of course, I said. Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that I'm not disappearing. I'm not choosing between families. I'm choosing to be whole. She kissed my forehead, the way she used to when she was little and I was sad about something. I love you both. I always have, and I always will. But now I need to learn to love myself completely, all the parts of me that came from Jessica, and all the parts that came from growing up as your daughter. After she left, Helen and I sat in our kitchen as the morning light streamed through the windows. Our house was still ours, our business was still ours, but everything had changed. Do you think she'll really forgive us? Helen asked. I think she already has, I said. Not because we deserve it, but because Jessica taught her how. We spent the next few weeks slowly rebuilding our relationship with Sarah. She came by every few days, sometimes bringing photos from her visits with Maria, sometimes sharing stories about her correspondence with Michael Turner. She also brought news that surprised us. She and Marcus were getting divorced, but not because of the stress of her identity crisis. They'd been growing apart for years, and learning about her true heritage had simply highlighted how little he really understood or supported her. I need to be with someone who loves all of me, she explained. Someone who celebrates my connection to Jessica's family instead of seeing it as competition. 6 months later, I walked my daughter down the aisle at her wedding to David Martinez, Maria's grandson, Jessica's cousin, who had grown up hearing stories about the baby girl who had been lost to their family. They'd met when Sarah first contacted Maria, and their connection had been immediate and deep. Helen cried through the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy. Sarah had found her way back to Jessica's family while choosing to keep us in her life as well. She was truly whole for the first time. During the father-daughter dance, Sarah looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. For what? For raising me to be strong enough to demand the truth. For loving me enough to let me go find myself. For being my dad even when I discovered I had another father. You'll always be my daughter, Sarah. Biology doesn't change that. I know. And Jessica's spirit doesn't change that either. I carry her with me, but I also carry everything you and Mom taught me. I'm both of their daughters now. As we danced, I thought about Jessica Martinez, the 19-year-old girl whose final act of love had been to give her daughter the chance at a full life. She'd trusted us with her most precious gift, and despite all our mistakes, all our lies, all our selfish fears, somehow we'd managed to raise Sarah to be exactly who Jessica had hoped she'd become. Strong. Kind. Forgiving. Whole. The song ended, and Sarah hugged me tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Both versions of you. All versions of you. That night, as Helen and I watched our daughter dance with her new husband, surrounded by both the Turner family and the Martinez family, I realized that the truth had done what our lies never could have accomplished. It had set us all free. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it made you think about the secrets in your own family, or if you simply enjoyed hearing about how love can survive even the deepest betrayals, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your own thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? How did you handle it? Your stories help others feel less alone in their struggles. And remember, the truth may be painful, but it's the only foundation strong enough to build real love upon. Until next time, take care of each other.